Boruto Uzumaki and Chihiro from Kagurabachi, both being one of the most powerful characters within their respective universes. And since Kagurabachi is relatively new to shonen manga, what better way to get people invested than having him battle one of his own contemporaries. So today we're gonna pit Boruto against Chihiro and see who comes out on top. But just to clarify, we're gonna do both bloodlusted and equal stats. That way this can be a tad bit more interesting, even if you have any preconceived notions about which universe is actually stronger. So with that being said, let's start with Kagurabachi. Now the universe of Kagurabachi is actually very simple. So similar to where Boruto characters use chakra to power their techniques and amplify their physical strength, it's pretty much the same thing in this universe. The only difference is that the name of that power source isn't chakra, it's spirit energy. Now this won't be a Kagurabachi power system explained video, so if you guys want to see that, let me know in the comment section. The main point I want to convey is that the characters in this universe are able to amplify their strength and speed to superhuman levels using this energy. And when it comes to the main protagonist, he does have a tad bit of an advantage. You see, Chihiro, which doesn't easily roll off the tongue as you guys have probably deduced so far, but yeah, this guy right here doesn't just possess the ability to manipulate spirit energy. He also possesses what's known as an enchanted blade. Now this weapon is one of the 7 blades that were created by his own father, Rukihira Kunishige. He somehow found a way to safely harness the power of the Daten Seiki, which by itself causes anyone that touches it to explode due to the abundance of spirit energy it provides. So similar to the Daten Seiki, the enchanted blades also possess the ability to amplify the spirit energy within its wielders to the point where the wielder's body cannot contain it. Only instead of causing one to explode, the spirit energy instead manifests in the form of specific shapes made of potent and concentrated spirit energy. Now in Chihiro's case, his enchanted blade known as Enten chooses to manifest this power in the form of goldfishes. These fishes also have different colors which also represent different abilities. 3 to be specific. Now the first one is Kudo, which is when he manifests a black goldfish covering his hand and katana in a black liquid. This technique releases flying slashes of different sizes, greatly extending the striking range of his katana. These slashes are also significantly more powerful than normal slashes due to its usage of spirit energy, showing the ability to instantly sever the torso of multiple guards and making deep cuts into the ground. So pretty much a concentrated form of spirit energy, his Rasengan per se, but one that puts a lot of strain on his body. Now there is another version of this technique known as Kuro Shred. This technique uses the same amount of spirit energy as a regular Kuro, but trades its power for the ability to release more rapid and compact slashes, which also lessens the physical burden on Chihiro's body. So it pretty much allows him to release up to 20 weaker slashes at the same time, instead of a big one which takes a lot of toll on his body. Now the crazy part about this is that he can then group up these mini slashes and aim them at one target, which will then amount to the same attack potency as a regular Kuro minus the strain. So it's a nifty ability. Now the second ability of Enten is called Aka or Aka, whichever one, it's fine. Now this one manifests in the form of a red goldfish that swims around his body to block him from any incoming attacks, which is also then absorbed by his katana. With that said, attacks comprised of very large amounts of spirit energy may not be fully absorbed, which means that he can still take damage as seen in his fight versus Sojo. Now what's crazy about this ability is the fact that he's then able to use any ability he absorbs through Enten. And so far there's been no mention of how many attacks Aka can absorb, and it also hasn't mentioned how many times he's able to use the absorbed attacks, but so far he has only used each attack only once. He also stated that absorbed attacks can only be stored temporarily, which could be referring to a period of time or number of uses. We are not sure as yet. By the way, chapter 41 revealed that he's also able to merge whatever attack he absorbed using Aka with his own abilities, as seen when he combined Kuro with Flamebone, so it's actually pretty overpowered. Now the last ability of Enten, which I consider to be the best ability, is Nishiki. This manifests in the form of a tricolored goldfish which becomes a cloak per se, but it's more so similar to Kaioken. It pretty much imbues his attacks with high density spirit energy, resulting in significantly more powerful attacks. It also grants him greatly amplified movement speed and agility, allowing him to mow down a legion of clones almost instantly as seen in chapter 6. Now this kinda somewhat leads into the speed scaling because, as I mentioned before, sorcerers are able to enhance their speed and strength using spirit energy. but users of the enchanted blades can do it to an even greater degree. This is even more so the case for Chihiro, since Nishiki easily scales him above multiple times the speed of lightning. That's because Sojo, that also possessed an enchanted blade, has the ability to wield lightning itself, called Mei, which Chihiro reacted to multiple times. This was first shown in chapter 9 when he leapt from a 6-story building just to intercept Sojo's attack before it reached the intended targets. By the way, this is a great indication of how strong these characters are, because being able to descend from a 6-story building in a single leap is pretty impressive, but not to the same level as tanking lightning itself, which he clearly did after intercepting the attack. Now, how he did this is also a great display of his abilities as well, since what he pretty much did was use the lightning he absorbed using Aka to then turn his katana into a lightning rod, which then attracted all the lightning strikes Sojo emitted in every direction. He then proceeded to activate Nishiki, which is stated to put an extra strain on his body to some degree, which shows how insane his stamina and durability is. But to get back to the speed argument, we later saw Sojo himself use Mei to cloak his body in lightning, which then allowed him to blitz his opponents at insane speeds. Mind you, these are the same opponents who easily reacted to Mei just a few chapters earlier. He then went on to cloak himself in twice the amount of spirit energy his body would normally allow, which then allowed him to even outspeed Chihiro, who already had lightning speed combat ability. Now, the craziness doesn't end there, because even Chihiro himself then went on to cloak himself in 3 times the amount of spirit energy his body would normally allow, once again surpassing Sojo in combat speed. So you could use this to imply that him at his peak using Nishiki is at least 3 to 4 times faster than the speed of lightning, which is absolutely insane. Now, when it comes to attack potency, this universe is relatively tame so far. Based on what we've seen so far, characters range from small building level to large building level plus. This is shown by Soya being able to destroy a good portion of an apartment building with a relatively casual hit, which of course scales below Tenri, who later got amplified by the Datenseki. You also have Sojo's Yui feat in chapter 9, which Chihiro easily cut through with Kuro, by the way. Then there's Hiyuki blowing through the Rakuzaichi auction house, which scales her power to around large building level plus. This of course upscales Chihiro to that level as well, or above, since he's implied to be at least relative or a tad bit stronger than Hiyuki. Now, we did get a panel showing the Saiti War, or Seiti War, or Seitai War, whatever you guys want to call it, that took place over 20 years ago. It actually has what seems to be a meteor or some sort of celestial body getting destroyed in the background, but we have no idea how they did it, so we can't really use it to upscale these characters as yet. Just keep it in mind, likely for what's to come later on in the series. With that said, what about Boruto? Well, I'm not gonna bore you guys with the unnecessary stuff. In essence, you're either in the camp that Naruto universe or the Naruto universe, and by extension Boruto, scales to planetary or star level plus in attack potency. This purely depends on how you interpret statements such as the 10 tails having chakra levels comparable to a small planet, which Kaguya surpassed by a considerable amount, and statements such as Kaguya being able to create or destroy her dimensions, Naruto having earth-shattering power, Kurama being able to turn the world to ash, Naruto tanking an attack that cut the moon in half, Momoshiki being able to create universes or worlds based on which translation used, and many other statements of that kind. So a lot of this comes down to interpretation, deciding what to not take literally and which translations you choose to use. What I can say is that regardless of whether you believe that the Naruto universe is large planetary or solar system level plus, it definitely scales above the power level of the characters within Kagurabachi. One feat that confirms this to be the case is Naruto tanking an attack that cut the moon in half at point blank range, and then went on to one-shot the person who emitted that attack. Now, the logic applied here is pretty much Newton's third law, which states that for every action there has to be an equal but opposite reaction, which means that if Toneri is able to exert moon levels worth of AP or attack potency, he must be able to take it as well, which means that such force would be required for Naruto to one-shot him, which clearly happened. So even if you're on the fence about large planetary or star level plus, I think we can all agree that moon level plus makes perfect sense. Now, this is all relevant to how strong Boruto is, because you'd naturally upscale what comes next based on what came before. So for example, if Kage is already planetary or solar system level plus in attack potency, Fused Momoshiki must be above that as well. Then you have Jigen and Ishiki, who both scale massively above Fused Momoshiki. Now Boruto himself scales greatly above Jigen while in base, and that's because he was able to destroy No Limiter Code, who is stated to have greatly surpassed Jigen's combat power. So at the very least, Boruto is massively above the version of Naruto who is at least Moon level plus in attack potency, which simply means that Boruto himself massively scales above Moon level plus. Now you guys can decide where exactly that is, since I'm not gonna get into that in this video. Now as it relates to speed, the scaling is actually pretty straightforward and doesn't require much scaling, to be honest. So we have the databook statement that refers to Killer Bee and the Raikage rushing at almost the speed of light. Not lightning, light, which is, by the way, without them being at full power or top speed. So you could argue that they could reach light speed if they use more power. Then you have Naruto in KCM1 reacting to the Raikage in his version 2 state, which is faster than his version 1 state that almost reached light speed. Now this is far from the peak within the universe itself, since 6 Paths Naruto, who is massively above KCM1 in both speed and power output, was able to dodge Madara's Light Fang Jutsu, which is stated to move at the speed of light. Now fast forward to Boruto, these characters would only scale multiple times faster than light itself, especially when talking about Boruto himself, who now greatly scales above Jigen due to his feats against Unlimited Code. So when it comes to speed, Boruto also edges out Kagurabachi as well. Now for the interesting part, which is the fight itself. You see, factually speaking, Boruto isn't losing to Chihiro. The difference in attack potency, which also scales to one's durability, makes it impossible for any of his attacks to significantly damage Boruto. Not to mention the fact that the speed difference between the two of them is between lightning speed and light speed. So it simply isn't touching Boruto. And just to be clear, when referring to light speed and lightning speed in the context of anime, it's always in reference to combat speed, which also comprises of reaction speed. So we're not talking about teleportation or travel speed per se. It's the same in DBZ, where these characters are multiple times the speed of light during combat, but still takes X amount of time to get from point A to point B, so hopefully that makes sense. With that said, we can make this a bit more interesting by using equal stats, which means that every attribute is pretty much neutralized, or at least some of them. So in this case, we're going to equalize AP, which is attack potency, speed, stamina to some degree, and also durability, which means that they would still retain their normal levels of dexterity, battle IQ, agility, etc, etc. By the way, you guys probably noticed that I didn't explain Boruto's abilities in depth like I did Chihiro's. That's mainly because I don't want to. I really don't want to, but I'm just kidding. I'll do it in the fight, of course, to some degree. You see, the fight itself really comes down to battle IQ and hacks, of course, which both of these characters possess in abundance. Boruto, for example, was able to outsmart and outmaneuver a supposed god with over 1,000 years of battle experience back when he was just 12 years old, which is more so an indictment against Momoshiki's own IQ level, but let's save that for another day, okay? But Boruto has been consistently shown to be very perceptive, having the ability to strategize and even adapt on the fly, even advancing his abilities such as the Rasengan to the point where he uses it with the rotational energy of the planet itself, which also induces severe levels of vertigo into his targets. He's also able to fly and literally teleport using Flying Thunder God. By the way, these are just some of his abilities, since he's also able to use water release to create massive tidal waves, wind release to increase his speed and attack potency, and lightning release, which causes his Rasengan to become invisible. Now these abilities would all be effective against Chihiro to some degree, but he's no slouch either. We saw this in chapter 8, I believe, when he was surrounded by multiple grenades going off at the same time. Knowing that his friend registered his spirit energy to be able to transport his enchanted blade outside of his pocket dimension, he then proceeded to cut all the grenades using his katana, thus infusing the bombs themselves with his energy, which then allowed his friend to transport them outside of the pocket dimension mid-detonation. Now just to clarify, this doesn't mean that he's grenade level, because these grenades were created using sorcery from spirit energy, so no, he's not gonna die to a grenade, or maybe he would, I'm not sure. So yeah, maybe he's grenade level, but yeah, that's beside the point, okay? I just want to clarify that that's not what this implied. Now he also has great battle instincts as well, as shown by him creating a variant of Kuro mid-battle. This is the ability I mentioned before, known as Kuro Shred. It pretty much allowed him to turn one giant Kuro slash into 20 smaller slashes instead, which allowed him to use the ability without without the strain a full Kuro would put on his body. By the way, even the narrator himself also points out that he did this purely based on instinct due to his innate understanding of the enchanted blades being accelerated. All of this to say that even without verse equalization, these guys are pretty much around the same level when it comes to battle IQ. So it really comes down to whose hacks abilities are more effective. You see, the main character from Kagurabachi, because I'm tired of trying to say his name correctly, he can pretty much absorb any ability Boruto sends his way, which includes Rasengan Uzuhiko if he intercepts the attack before Boruto hits him. That would then give him the ability to use Uzuhiko, since Aka allows him to store abilities in their raw state, regardless of what it is. Though one caveat to this is the fact that he can't really absorb or fully absorb abilities that have too much power or too much energy, which might be a problem depending on the amount of energy used by Uzuhiko. What I will say is that the energy limitation is a tad bit arbitrary and may not apply since we're using equal stats. Now, Boruto also has the ability to absorb attacks using his Karma Seal, but the issue with this is that he can't use the Karma Seal without losing control of his body to Momoshiki. So just to be clear, this video is just current base Boruto versus Chihiro, no Karma Seal. With that said, let's go back to the current versions of these characters, because even with equal stats, Chihiro still has a stamina problem. That's because even though he has the same amount of stamina as Boruto at a base level, he still needs to exert himself more to get to his top speed. This stems from the fact that even though speed itself has been equalized in this fight, I'm still keeping the mechanics in which these characters can access those speeds intact. So as stated before, he's able to amp his body with spirit energy using Nishiki in order to access his top speeds. And the more energy he cloaks himself in, the faster he gets. So it's very simple. Now the downside to this is that it takes a great toll on his body. And as seen in his fight versus Sojo, it took around 12 seconds for his body to go numb after using that power consistently. So even if the time it takes for him to get tired gets extended under this hypothetical, he'll still get tired before Boruto does, since it takes such a toll on his body to maintain that equalized speed, while Boruto is able to casually maintain those speeds with no trouble whatsoever, going from fighting Unlimited Code to the 4 Divine Trees, then to Sage Mitsuki, only to fight Kawaki, the Cloud Grimes, and the Shinjus again just a few hours later. It simply takes less for him to do the same thing Chihiro does using Nishiki. That's why I said I'm equalizing stamina to some degree, because I'm not changing the multiple by which one's stamina is affected by whichever ability they choose to use. I'm simply equalizing the overall amount. So picture a stamina gauge per se that has 10 bars. Let's say that it normally takes around 3 bars of stamina per usage of Nishiki. That is still the case under this hypothetical. The only difference is that the gauge now has 20 bars instead of 10. It still takes 3 bars worth of stamina to use Nishiki, but he can use it more times and for longer due to the overall increase in stamina. So he would need to land a decisive blow on Boruto before he runs low on stamina due to the overusage of Nishiki. Or he can choose not to spam Nishiki, which would leave him open to attacks from Boruto, which he wouldn't be able to react to using his base speed. So I think how this fight goes for the most part is that they'll go head to head exchanging blows and clashing their katanas. Boruto will be able to dodge Kuro since they both have the same amount of speed, equal speed and all. And even if he gets into a bind, he would be able to escape using teleportation, which is instantaneous movement. Now Chihiro would also be able to react to, dodge, and outright absorb Boruto's attacks for the most part, but there is a win con on both sides. You see, all Boruto has to do is outlast him as he loses more stamina over time by trying to keep up with Boruto's speed. Then it would be much easier to blitz him while he's tired, thus bringing the fight to a close. Or he could also find a way to simply outsmart him and catch him off guard using his vanishing Rasengan. One could even argue that if Chihiro tries to absorb Rasengan Uzuhiko, he would be under the effects of the abilities such as Vertical, since it has been shown that he does take some damage from the abilities he absorbs using Aka depending on their power level. So those are the two ways in which Boruto could still win under these conditions. Now as for Mr. Rukihiro, which is the last name of the main character, is actually a bit more straightforward. As I mentioned before in this video, Aka doesn't just allow him to absorb attacks and use them at a later time, but it also allows him to combine them with his own abilities. So if he does go on to absorb one of Boruto's Rasengans or even Uzuhiko without the side effects, and then combines it with Kuro, that would be an attack with the attack potency of Boruto and Chihiro combined, thus surpassing Boruto's own attack potency. So if he does trade blows with Boruto and surprises him with that attack, he would easily overpower him and cut him down. Now of course he would have to worry about Momoshiki, but that's a separate argument because this is Boruto versus Chihiro, not Chihiro versus Momoshiki. So those are the ways in which these characters could win this fight. I tried to be as fair as possible, but who wins this fight under these circumstances really just depends on who the writer wants to win, as with any other versus battle, to be honest. Now with that said guys, let me know your thoughts on the video, because that's it for the video. And if you guys want to see me do any versus battles against other characters in Kagurabachi and Boruto characters, I'll gladly do it. I also want to do some more videos on Kagurabachi, but we'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts on this video, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.